Sizawuhlala phi ngoku?
The minimum wage could be hiked by more than 8% if the National Minimum Wage Commission has its way. It's recommending an adjustment that would raise the pay by at least 25 rand per household. Stakeholders have been given until the 13th of this month to respond to the proposal. For more on this, we're joined now by the head of the National Employees Association, Gerhard Papenfus. Thank you so much for your time, Gerhard. We do appreciate it. Let's just start off with whether or not this is going to be welcome news, given that there has been much criticism about the national minimum wage bill, that it has it has not been satisfactory or speaks to, for example, inflation.
Well, if you're talking about 8%, it's just a little bit more than the current inflation rate. And one cannot argue about the fact that people living on or earning a minimum wage need an increase to sustain themselves. The other side of the coin, of course, is whether those businesses that pay minimum wages because they can't afford to pay more, whether they can afford to pay it. And that is the market is a cruel entity. If he can't afford to pay something, it adapts. It decreases its number of employees, it reduces number of working hours. So that's the unfortunate part. You cannot manipulate the market. And the question is always, in terms of a minimum wage, what is the effect on the market? So that's the two sides of the coin. People living on a minimum wage, that is really a minimum wage. That it's almost too little to come by. But the other side of the coin is those that's paying the wage, and we're sitting with a huge unemployment rate. And the question is always, how do you satisfy the demand of those earning this being paid on this level, and the market, which is the employers, vulnerable employers that cannot afford to pay that. So that's the question. Domestic workers, for instance, that is some of the workers that will benefit from this. One must remember that many employers are also workers. Domestic workers, can they afford to pay that wage? And if they can't, it will impact on unemployment. So that is the question. How will the market respond? That's always the question. You can make a minimum wage whatever you want to make it. The question is, how will the market respond? In South Africa, with a unemployment rate unofficial between 40 and 50%. And I'm not arguing for lowering of wages. I'm just saying this is quite a dilemma.
Okay, so you're saying, how will the market respond to this? How do you think the market would respond to this? Because it is, you're right, it is, there are two sides to the coin to this, because if you have an employer that cannot afford this, but also you have workers that are desperate for an increase and are desperate for survival, because if you calculate this, if you're receiving about 25 rand an hour, what does that work out to at the end of the month? It's bare minimum. It's almost nothing. So what are you working for? Just your transport costs. How are people surviving? So how would you suggest the market would respond to this?
Well, the market, employers that's battling, and I'm talking about households. I'm talking about employers in rural areas. I'm talking about small businesses that really can't afford to pay more. Of course, the moment they cannot afford to pay it, they will adapt. They will introduce certain measures. For instance, retrench workers, reduce working hours, mechanize. That impacts immediately on labor. What we need in South Africa is more prosperous businesses, more employers, more entrepreneurs. We need more rich people so that the poor can become rich as well. And I'm use the term rich very loosely, but this is a very complex situation. Your question is, the worker needs more, and we accept that. But what if the employer cannot pay more? That the employer, if you cannot pay more, what do you do? That is, that is a conflict. That's a difficult situation, and there is no answer to that. We need a more prospering economy. We need more people in the workplace. And you must remember, many of these workers that earn these minimum wages is not only for themselves. It is, they sustain a couple of other people as well. So it is the bare minimum. You're very right. And the answer to that is not increasing of minimum wages. It needs an expanding labor market, more businesses, more people in the workplace, relaxing of labor laws to make it easier, less risky to employ, a friendly business environment, inviting people to become business people and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
That is what we need in South Africa. But we cannot argue that the minimum wage is actually the bare minimum.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things you mentioned would be in an ideal South Africa. We need more rich people to come in and create these job opportunities and these businesses so we can create more jobs. But also we are dealing with another big crisis, which is the constant rolling blackouts, which really hamper economic growth. But you have until the 13th of this month, or stakeholders have been given until the 13th this month to respond to this. What would you say would be an ideal minimum wage?
Yeah, that is, you know what, all I'm saying is, you know what, as an employer and knowing what is happening in the market and seeing the circumstances under which smaller businesses, struggling businesses are operating, I cannot argue for an increase or a higher minimum wage. And I'm not even talking about the 8% now. I'm talking about, a much higher minimum wage. But on the other hand, I know that if you understand that or know what workers pay just to get to work, then that's the other side of the coin, and you understand how do they survive, and not only for themselves. I mean, if they sustaining 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people with that remaining money after they've paid travel fees. So as an employer, as a person representing business, I understand this is one heck of a dilemma.
Could you give me a figure, Gerhard? Are you able to give me a figure? Am I giving you difficult questions so early in 2023?
That will be thumbsuck. That will be thumbsuck.
But as the National Employers Association, are you not able to give me a figure?
For what is an ideal minimum wage?
Yes.
You know what? Let me tell you what. As a free marketeer, I will argue for no minimum wage at all, because what is happening that an entrepreneur and a businessman wants to pay workers as much as you can. The payment of a wage is one of the things that a businessman like to do. That you love doing it. Paying wages is a good thing to do. It is a satisfying thing to do, and to pay a good worker a good wage, that is the ideal situation. The other side is, if you cannot pay a particular wage, well, then don't force a person to pay that, because there is a low wage, even less than the minimum wage, is better than no wage. Because if you lose your job, you fall back for a while on unemployment grants, and then you fall back on a $350 per month. That is no money. So any wage, even a very low wage, is better than no wage at all. So I'm not in favor of a minimum wage whatsoever. I think the market needs to be freed up. And the current regulations and labor laws, for instance, on dismissal, restricts the market. The moment you employ a person, you employ a risk. If you fire that worker is going to cost you money. And I say an employer built the risk of a dismissal into the wage. So the moment you employ somebody, you must take into consideration that this person, you don't know him, at some point you'll have to dismiss him, and that will cost you a lot of money. So what do? You pay him less. If you have the freedom to dismiss easy, you will pay more. That is liberalizing the labor market, and you will decrease, you get more people into the marketplace. So if you ask me what is the ideal minimum wage, I say that is no minimum wage.
Okay, thank you so much for your insights. We do appreciate it. That is Gerhard Papenfus, who's the CEO of the National Employers Association. Still to come on South Africa Tonight, we'll have more news. Do